Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nasta Prayesu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. This morning we are reading from Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 2, Text 21, title The Lord in the Heart. Tasmat Brubho Antaram Anayata Niruddha Sapta Ayatana Anapeksha Stitva Muhurta Ardham Akuntha Drishtihi Nirvidya Murdhan Visrijet Param Gata Tasmad Prubhur Antaram Unnayata Tasmad Prubhur Antaram Unnayata Niruddha Saptayam Niruddha Saptayatam Yatanona Peksha Niruddha Saptayatanam Yatanona Peksha Stitva Muhurtardham Akunta Drishtir Stitva Muhurtardham Akunta Drishtir Nirvidyam Murdhan Visrijet Param Gata Nirvidyam Murdhan Visrijet Param Gata Tasmad Prubhur Antaram Unnayet Tasmad Prubhur Antaram Unnayeta Niruddha Sapta Yantona Yatanona Peksha Niruddha Sapta Yatanona Peksha Stitva Muhurtardham Akunta Drishtir Stitva Muhurtardham Akunta Drishtir Nirvidyam Murdhan Visrajet Param Gata Nirvidyam Murdhan Visrajet Param Gata. You can read. Tasmad bhur antaram gunayata nirdhasatayatano napeksha stitva muhurtardham akunta drishtir nirvidyamurdhan visijat param gata. Tasmat, from there. Bhruva, of the eyebrows. Antaram, in between. Unayata, should be brought in. Niruddha, by blocking. Sapta, 7. Ayatana, outlets of the life air. Anapeksha, independent of all material enjoyment. Stitva, by keeping. Muhurta, of a movement. Ardham, half. Akunta, back home, back to Godhead. Drishti, one whose aim is targeted like that. Nirvidya, punching. Murdhan, the cerebral hole. Visrijet, should give up his body. Param, the supreme. Gata, having gone to. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Thereafter, Bhakti Yogis should push the life air up between the eyebrows and then, blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme. Please repeat. Thereafter, the Bhakti Yogi should push the life air up between the eyebrows and then, blocking the 7 outlets of the life air, he should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. He is completely free from all desires. If he completely free from all desires for material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme. Purport. The process of giving up all material connections and returning home back to Godhead, the Supreme, is recommended herein. The condition is that one should be completely freed from all desire for material enjoyment. There are different grades of material enjoyments in respect to duration of life and sensual gratification. The highest plane of sensual enjoyment for the longest period of life is mentioned in Bhagavad Gita 9:20. All are but material enjoyments, and one should be thoroughly convinced that he has no need of such a long duration of life, even in the Brahmaloka planet. Oh my God. He must return home back to Godhead and must not be attracted by any amount of material facilities. In the Bhagavad Gita 2:59, it is said that this sort of material detachment is possible to attain when one is acquainted with the supreme association of life. Param drishtva na nivartate. One cannot be freed from material attraction unless he has complete understanding of the nature of spiritual life. The propaganda by a certain class of impersonalists that spiritual life is void of all varieties of dangerous propaganda to mislead the living being into becoming more and more attracted by material enjoyments. As such, persons with a poor fund of knowledge cannot have any conception of the Param, the Supreme. They try to stick to the varieties of material enjoyments, although they may flatter themselves as being Brahman realized souls. Such less intelligent persons cannot have any conception of the Param as mentioned in this verse, and therefore they cannot reach the Supreme. The devotees have full knowledge of spiritual life, spiritual world, the personality of Godhead and his transcendental association in unlimited spiritual planets called Brahma Lokas. Herein, Akunta Drishti is mentioned. Akunta and Vaikuntha convey the same import. And only one who has his aim fixed upon the spiritual world and personal association of the Godhead can give up his material connections even while living in this material world. These Param and Paramdham mentioned in several places in Bhagavad Gita are one and the same things. One who goes to the Paramdham doesn't return to the material world. You know this sloka? Abrahma bhuvana loko punaravartina arjuna mam upete tu kunteya punarjanma navidyate. One who goes to the Paramdham does not return to the material world. This freedom is not possible even by reaching the topmost loka of the material world. The life here passes through 7 openings, namely 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears and 1 mouth. Generally, it passes through the mouth at the time of an ordinary man's death. But the yogi, as above mentioned, who controls the life here in his own way, generally releases the life here by punching the cerebral hole in the head. The yogi therefore blocks up all above mentioned 7 openings so that the life here will naturally burst forth through the cerebral hole. This is the sure sign of the great devotees living the material connection. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Salakya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurube Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulangayate Girim Yat Kripatamaha Vande Sri Guru Dinatarini Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Namaham Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devim Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatarinam. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thereafter, the Bhakti Yogi should push the live hair up between the eyebrows and then blocking the 7 outlets of the live hair. He should maintain his aim for going back home, back to Godhead. If he is completely free from all desires, from material enjoyment, he should then reach the cerebral hole and give up his material connections, having gone to the Supreme. So here Prabhupada has mentioned in the first 2 sentences, the process of giving up all material connections and returning home back to Godhead, the Supreme, is recommended herein. The condition is that one should be completely free from desires for material enjoyment. So the first 6th chapter of Bhagavad Gita is nicely explained by the Supreme Lord about Karma Yoga. And the second 6 chapters is also very nicely explained by the Supreme Lord, is called Bhakti Yoga, and the last 6 chapters are Jnana Yoga. So the Karma Yogi and the Jnana Yogi is very nicely explained in 9:20, as explained here. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice seeking the heavenly planets worship me indirectly. They take birth on the planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. So those who have material desires that they want to enjoy, even though they study the Vedas, but they target to go home to Indraloka, Chandraloka, Suryaloka. Prabhupada has mentioned here to different demigods like Indra, Chandra, Indraloka, Chandraloka, etc., etc. And also he has mentioned also those personalities they elevate themselves to go to the higher planets. Such as heavenly planets known as Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapaloka, etc. But still, their material desire remains, because despite studying the Vedas, they become just the Vedic student. They practice the Vedas, but they have a lot of material desires that they go to heavenly planets to enjoy. As Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, from earthly planet, there are hundreds and thousands of times more material enjoyment is there in such planet, so therefore they desire to go over there. But bhakti yogis, therefore the bhakti yogis should push the life hair up between the eyebrows and then blocking 7 outlets of the life hair. He should maintain his aim for going home back to Godhead. Now, for going home back to Godhead, in the ancient days, the Munis and Rishis, they used to practice the process by shutting down by their 2 hills from the evacuating process. They try to shut down that, to push the life air to go to their navel, to their abdomen, to the heart, from there to the heart, to the chest, to the palate, to the eyebrows, and ultimately to the cerebral pit. As Maharaj was explaining yesterday just very nicely about the 6 chakras. So by their yogic process, they try to awaken those chakras. And those chakras are, Maharaj, those chakras are?
Well, there's the bottom one, which is the Muladhara chakra. Then there is the,
Swadhisthana chakra.
Swadhisthana chakra, that's the next one up.
Muladhara chakra, Swadhisthana chakra.
Then there is the
Manipuraka chakra. Then Anahata chakra. Anahata chakra. So these are the 6 chakras one awakens. So, but the 7th chakra, which is not considered as chakra, which is at the top of the head, and ultimately by means of the process of yogic process, one pushes the life air. In other words, the soul goes all the way to the head. I was pointing out to Maharaj, although Maharaj was pointing out just that it makes a hole, and thus in this way just the soul passes from the head to go home back to Godhead. And that whole Srila Prabhupada has elsewhere mentioned very nicely that since the space of the soul is 1/10 of the 1,000th of the tip of the hair, so therefore the soul passes through the pore of the hair from the head, and thus one goes home back to Godhead. But if he has material desire, he doesn't go to the spiritual world because of the material world. Because of the material desire, he returns back again to the material world. And again, if he has material desire, as it is mentioned very nicely here, that although he studies scrutinizing the Vedas, but at the same time, just he has desire to serve the demigods, he offers different oblations to the demigods, and he drinks somaras. In this way, just he goes to the heavenly planet to enjoy. But again, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, in ancient days, those yogis, by their yogic process, they used to do this process to push their life here all the way up to the cerebral. Ultimately, they go home back to Godhead by not having the material desire. But whereas in modern age, it is very difficult for the modern age people to practice such process, and they were not familiar and they were not comfortable to practice such process. So therefore, the Lord, out of His causeless mercy, He has given in the Bhakti Yoga, those who practice the pure Bhakti, as it is mentioned, thereafter Bhakti Yogi should push the life hair up between the eyebrows and then blocking the seven outlets of the life hair. He should maintain his aim going home back to Godhead. So the point is that the modern age people, just they are not familiar with what the yogis, rishis, munis, that they used to practice. And that's what Prabhupada has mentioned. It is sort of mechanical way they used to do that. But whereas in the modern age, it is very difficult for modern age people. So Krishna, out of His causeless mercy, has given this Bhakti Yoga. By practicing the Bhakti Yoga, one can have higher taste to achieve such perfection, to go home back to Godhead. So having the higher taste means once we practice Krishna consciousness as we are practicing, even though we are staying in the big city like in New York and then many other cities, they practice the Bhakti Yoga. And as Krishna says, Bhaktya mam avijanati, by bhakti you can know me, or by bhakti you can understand me. And thus we understand by practicing the Bhakti Yoga, we have the higher taste to achieve the love of God going home back to Godhead. Then Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here, he must return home back to Godhead and must not be attracted by any amount of material facilities. In Bhagavad Gita 259, Visaya vinivartate niraharasya dehina rasavarjam rasapyasyam param drishtra nivartante. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste of the sense object remains. But seizing such sense engagements by experiencing a higher taste is fixed in consciousness. So even though one practices Krishna consciousness and he restricts the sense enjoyment, but still the taste of sense objects are there. The sense object, since the sense object is right in front of us, we see, we practice Krishna consciousness and we see nice car, nice house, nice this, nice that. So many nice things are in front of me, in front of us. So what happens? We still try to keep that object in front of us. So it is not possible for us to go home back to Godhead. Abraham bhuvana loka punaravartino arjuna mam upatitu kaunteya punarjanma navidite. Right, as Srila Prabhupada has mentioned here in Bhagavad Gita. That Param or Param Dham mentioned in several places in Bhagavad Gita are one and the same thing. One who goes to the Param Dham doesn't return to the material world. But once by practicing Krishna consciousness, one becomes eligible to go home back to Godhead. Param Dham na nivartante. But if one doesn't practice properly, have so many material desires, thus one cannot go home back to Godhead, and one returns back to this material world again. Thus again goes through the process of birth, death, old age and disease. Punarapi maranam and punarapi janamam. So he goes through again the same process. So therefore, the process of practicing Krishna consciousness makes one much easier one to practice seeking the higher truth to go home back to Godhead. The life here passes through 7 openings, namely 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. That is there are 7 gates. But those who do not practice properly Krishna consciousness, then again become victim. And generally, it is common people in general, Srila Prabhupada has mentioned, common people in general, what they do, just having many material desires, when they leave their body, their life here passes through the mouth, and thus they cannot go home back to Godhead. But having higher truth, those who are taking interest for higher truth and practice Krishna consciousness, show their utmost interest, they try to push their life here all the way up to the cerebral, thus in this way just they try to go home back to Godhead. But the yogi, as above mentioned, who controls the life here in his own way, generally release the life here by all the above mentioned 7 openings, so that the life here will naturally burst forth through the cerebral hole. This is the sure sign of great devotees leaving the material connection. So in other words, the yogi tried to practice his Krishna consciousness, meditating upon the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. He pushes the life here to go home back to Godhead. But we, the devotees, when we try to practice Krishna consciousness, having higher taste of the devotional service, and we become eligible to go home back to Godhead. And this process is more easier than the yogic process, as in the ancient days they used to practice. As Srila Prabhupada has mentioned very nicely in Easy Journey to Other Planets. Also Maharaj has mentioned yesterday, in Easy Journey to Other Planets, Prabhupada has mentioned that by dint of his yogic process, just by meditating upon the Supreme Lord, one passes the material realm. Passing the material realm, just he crosses the Brahmajyoti, then enters into the spiritual realm. And one becomes happy. One is not happy until goes, takes refuge at the lotus feet of Lord Hari. But the modern materialistic scientists, they spending millions and millions of dollars. They sent the space jet. They cannot even cross the material realm. So this is the difference between them and us, the spiritualists. So therefore, by not distracting ourselves, as the scientists, they say just we went to moon, but Srila Prabhupada says just we never went to the moon. So that was the biggest controversy. But factually, and then they say just in the moon there is nothing, it is completely big holes and desert and this and that. But as it is mentioned in Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam very nicely, that the in charge of the moon planet is Soma, and that because of the presence of Soma over there are so many vegetations, greenery and vegetations and so forth is there. And because of that, just now, we get this greenery all over in the material world, since Soma is the in charge and he supplies and he therefore we get fruits, vegetables and this greenery, all these trees and etc. in this world. But whereas the scientists, they say there is no such thing over there. So Prabhupada has mentioned just there is that that they never went to the moon because they have not seen the real feature of the moon. So coming back to the point that the business of the devotees practice Krishna consciousness, their ultimate goal should be to go home back to Godhead. In other words, by just not able to practice the way the yogis, the munis and rishis in ancient days they used to do, and it is a difficult process and we are not able to practice and we are not familiar. So therefore we have the sublime method given by Srila Prabhupada to us, that when we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And when we chant the holy name, we will become fixed ourselves in this path of perfection. Ultimately, we go home back to Godhead. And we can go home back to Godhead by the blessings of the spiritual master or Guru and Krishna. That should be our aim. But whereas here, this part, this verse has mentioned, the yogi therefore blocking of all the above mentioned 7 openings, so that the life air will naturally burst forth through the cerebral hole. That is the yogic process. But we, the bhakti yogis, we try to practice and we try to become Krishna conscious and we try to have the higher taste In this way, we try to push our life here up to the cerebral to go home back to Godhead. I will stop here. Maharaj has corrections, comments, chastisements, because I didn't read yesterday, I was not feeling well. Please, Maharaj, comment.
Well, this is a continuation of yesterday's verse before that.
Right, I saw that.
Whole concept of how the yogis do their deal, their easy journey to other planets, or they're going back home, back to Godhead, or tomorrow or the next couple of days we'll start talking about mystic yoga.
Yes.
Mystic cities.
Right.
So we talked a little bit about this whole, smorgasbord
Right.
of different things that are going on here. And as we're hearing that no one will ever force us to leave this material world. If we want something here,
Right.
Krishna will let us stay here
Right.
as long as we want.
Right.
We will never be kicked out of here. We'll be
Right.
kicked out of our bodies, but
Right.
never kicked out of the material world.
Right.
And so one day we decided that that's just not good enough. We want to go back to the spiritual world.
Right.
Um,
Can I interrupt for a second? Yes, Maharaj. Ye jatha mam prapadyante tams tatheva bhajamyam. As you surrender to me, I will reward you accordingly. As the Lord says, it's very clear. The Lord is not making us compulsory or mandatory that we have to leave this world. It is up to our choice. Choice is ours. And Srila Prabhupada has mentioned very nicely that either material or spiritual, there is no such thing in between. So either we have to be strongly inclined to go home back to Godhead, or else if we have material desire, that will remain here within this material world. So factually, as Maharaj has confirmed, that nobody is forcing us to leave this world, this material world. We can stay as long as we want, and we can go Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punara Bhartino Arjuna Mama Bhutyetu Konteya Punarjanma Navidita. Even the Lord says that very clearly. Brahma Lok, Tikal Patal Lok, we can go up and down the highest material planet, Brahma Loka. We can enjoy Swargam Loka, Martya Loka, Patal Loka, Atala, Swargam, Martya, Patala, Atala, Bhutala, Rasatala, Talatala, way down, and the Swargaloka and the highest planet, Brahma Loka. We can go all over and come back and forth and take birth again and again, die again, and enjoy more and more, and nobody is forcing us. But ultimately, the desire to go home back to Godhead, after traveling, when the jiva becomes breathless, traversing within this material world, jiva becomes breathless and finally realize that this is not my ultimate place. And then what he thinks, how can I go home back to God? Praise to the Lord. The Lord says, now you are realizing just now, finally? Okay. The Lord holds him and says, okay, I cannot send you directly home back to Godhead. I cannot make you to return back to my abode. The way you went independently very easily, now you have to come to me, then do what I say. The Lord says very clearly. And therefore the Lord sent to the spiritual master. The Lord says, you go to my representative and you surrender to him. Do what he says, intact and as it is. Then ultimately you can come to me. Maharaj, please. Next point. Your next point you wanted to make.
Well, the next point I wanted to make is that there's a verse, I think it's in the 11th canto, Ye Ye Ravanda Vimustamani Vayashna Bhavadava Shuddha Udaya Aruya Krishna Parampadam Pata Patanti Bhavadavita Yusmaramriya. That there are people who imagine that they're elevated,
Right.
but they fall back down in the material world because they did not take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet.
Right.
So anything you do that does not focus on devotional services, bring glory, is the circle.
Right.
You will rotate,
Right.
and you come back to where
Correct.
you were. But the one thing that doesn't do that is devotional service. You will leave the material world if you do that. But anything else, if you go to the heavenly planets, or if you go to the hellish world because you're sinful, or you go to the Brahmachoti, whatever it is, you will wind up rotating back. And you'll be again in the material world, again at the crossroads, again in some new body.
Right.
One thing that doesn't do that is taking shelter of Krishna's lotus feet. Patantiyata, Yusman, Umbraya, because they fall down because of not taking shelter.
Right. So without taking shelter, we have no paramgati, no paramgati, no just higher gati, no higher destination. Yes, we go to Patal Loka, we go to Swarga Loka, and between the spiritual and the material world, there is a division which is nothing else but called Brahmajyoti, and that is the effulgence, that which is emanating from the body of the personality of Godhead. So, even if strong Mayavadis, the voidist, impersonalist, the Mayavadis, they try to meditate upon the impersonal feature of the personality of Godhead. Within the syllable Om, the personal and impersonal, both the features are there. So the Mayavadis, they meditate upon the Supreme Lord of his impersonal aspect of this feature. That is nothing else but the Brahma-Jyoti itself. And when one becomes very strong practitioner of impersonal aspect upon the impersonal feature of the personality of Godhead, then one goes to Brahma-Jyoti. And within the Brahma-Jyoti there is nothing else but the impersonal aspect, in other words, only the light. Even though that is spiritual, because that is emanating from the body of the Supreme Lord, even though that is spiritual, but that is impersonal aspect of the feature of the personality of Godhead. So therefore, the jivas, they go, their body becomes completely fused, and they suffer. They suffer without food, water, shelter, nothing is there. They suffer and remain always in agony. But out of causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord, since they have meditated upon the Supreme Lord, even though impersonal feature, so what happens? When the Lord's pure devotees, those who try to see the world affairs, as Srila Prabhupada traveled 14 times to this world to resolve the material problem by means of the spiritual solution. But whereas the yogis, munis and rishis like Navayogendras, like Nārada Muni, like 4 Kumaras, they travel to this universe to resolve their material universe, to resolve their material problems by means of spiritual solutions. That's what Srila Prabhupada has given us. And by their causeless mercy, such empowered souls, when they pass through, and if they see such jivas suffering within this Brahmajyoti, by their causeless mercy of such pure devotees, when they say or when they try to express that now you understood, you all didn't listen or didn't meditate upon the beautiful form of that Trivanga Lalita Sundara, that threefold bending form of the personality of Godhead, who is no one else but Kesava, who has beautiful hairs. His feature is more beautiful than millions of cupids. And such beautiful form of that personality of Godhead, you didn't meditate. And then when you quit your body, just you could come to me, the Lord is saying. But you didn't do so. And you didn't do so. So therefore, result is that you are suffering. So therefore, by causeless mercy of my pure devotees, when they pass through Brahmajyoti, by their merciful glance, you listen to them, then they try to help you to come to my lotus feet. So that is why the Mayavadis, the impersonalists, they work hard. In other words, they meditate upon the personality of Godhead. They go through severe austerities, but the result becomes zero. They ended up in the Brahmajyoti. And whereas we, the devotees, even if we sitting within this New York City, we try to meditate on the personality of Godhead, having little higher truth, just by meditate, and even if we can't, we are unable to, we come in front of the deities and chant the holy name of the Lord. If we quit our body, we can go home back to Godhead. It's so easy and sublime method the Lord out of His causeless mercy has given. So therefore, our method is very easier, and it is the bona fide method by which, if we practice Krishna consciousness, and we can go home back to Godhead easily. Am I correct, Maharaj? Thank you. Anything else? Granthra Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Dayal Lord Shri Radha Govinda Dev ki jai, His Holiness Chandrasekhar Swami's Association ki jai. Thank you very much, Maharaj.